The sun beat down on the shimmering expanse of the Okavango Delta, painting the reeds in hues of gold and ochre. Ethan Cale, a man carved by years of harsh sun and quiet observation, moved with the deliberate stealth of a seasoned predator. His late 30s had etched lines around eyes that perpetually scanned the horizon, though today they were fixed on something extraordinary, a rare pale-coated lion pride. Dressed in his familiar khaki vest and cargo pants, he was just another shadow in the vast wilderness, his heart pounding not from fear, but from the thrill of discovery. He meticulously tracked their movements, the humid air thick with the scent of damp earth and distant life. Through his telephoto lens, the pride unfolded, a magnificent, almost white-maned male, 4 watchful females, and 3 cubs. One of them, a tiny enigma with a coat the color of burnished gold and a distinct dark patch above her right eye, held his gaze. She moved with an unusual grace, a spark of something beyond instinct in her amber eyes. Ethan felt an instinctive pull, a professional fascination deepening into something more profound. These were creatures he could study for a lifetime, a living anomaly. The light was fading, and Ethan needed to retrieve a vital piece of equipment from his second vehicle, parked on the other side of a narrow channel. A familiar log bridge, a collection of rough-hewn timber spanning the murky water, seemed stable enough. He'd crossed it countless times. It was routine. Mid-stride, a sickening crack tore through the quiet. The ancient wood beneath his feet splintered. In a heart-stopping lurch, the world tilted, and Ethan plunged into the surprisingly deep, cold embrace of the delta. His heavy camera backpack, usually an extension of himself, now became a lead weight, dragging him relentlessly into the submerged tangle below. No, not like this. He gasped, the water instantly filling his mouth as he fought to orient himself. Panic, cold and sharp, clawed at his throat. His foot, snagged on what felt like a gnarled root or submerged branch, held fast. His lungs burned, screaming for air. He thrashed, the water churning around him, but the entanglement was absolute. Instinct, honed by years of surviving the wild, kicked in. He reached for the straps of his backpack, fumbling with the clips, each second an eternity. The expensive lenses, the meticulously maintained body, all lost. He felt the weighty resistance give way, the backpack sinking with a silent gulp into the darkness. Relief, fleeting and potent, flooded him, but his ankle remained stubbornly caught. The branches were a vice, tightening with every desperate move. Raw, primal terror seized him. Above the water, a new chilling tableau was forming. The entire pale pride, roused by the disturbance, stood tense at the water's edge. Their amber eyes, usually aloof, were fixed on his struggle, a silent, predatory assessment. This is it, he thought, a cold certainty settling in his bones, paralyzing him more effectively than any physical restraint. Then, to his utter disbelief, a small golden shape detached itself from the watchful pride. The golden cub, with her distinctive eye patch, approached the water's edge, a flicker of curious intent in her gaze. "Get back," Ethan croaked, a guttural sound choked by water and fear. It was a futile warning, not just for himself, but for her. A cub, so small, so vulnerable, approaching a drowning man. She stepped into the water, not hesitating, paddling with an unnatural purpose that defied everything he knew about wild animals. He instinctively tried to stay still, fearing she would be pulled down by his thrashing. Her small head cut a steady path towards him, her focus unwavering. He felt a sudden sharp pressure on his ankle, not on his flesh, but on the gnarled branch trapping him. Small teeth, surprisingly strong, worked with an almost surgical precision. A distinct snap, and then, miraculously, a sudden release. His foot was free. The cub surfaced, eyes locking with his, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. Then, with a dip of her head, she turned and began swimming to shore, her small body cutting through the water, seemingly expecting him to follow. She saved me," Ethan whispered, the words barely audible, disbelief warring violently with the pure, unadulterated instinct to survive. He pushed himself forward, his limbs heavy and shaking, pulling himself onto the muddy bank. The pale male lion, a formidable presence, took a step towards him, a low rumble stirring in his chest, but the golden cub, dripping wet and resolute, positioned herself between them, letting out a soft, almost protective chuff. The male paused, his massive head tilting, his inscrutable gaze shifting between the cub and Ethan. Then inexplicably he lowered himself to the ground, a silent, almost acquiescent gesture. The cub rubbed her small head against Ethan's soaking leg, a soft, familiar touch that sent a jolt through his entire being before turning to rejoin her pride. As if on cue, the entire family melted back into the shadows of the acacias, leaving Ethan alone with the fading light and an impossible memory. Shaking violently, his muscles screaming from the ordeal, Ethan stumbled towards his Jeep. Thousands of dollars worth of equipment lay at the bottom of the delta, but his life somehow had been saved by a lion cub. As he peeled off his soaked vest, a sudden thought pierced through the haze of shock. His chest-mounted GoPro. Did it capture any of that? His fingers fumbled for the small camera. The REC light was still glowing, a beacon in the deepening twilight. The device was intact, still recording. A flicker of profound hope, laced with an even deeper, disorienting confusion, washed over him. The hum of the generator was the only sound breaking the vast silence of Ethan's remote camp. The canvas walls of his tent felt like thin skin against the crushing expanse of the Delta night. He sat hunched over his laptop, the dim glow of the screen illuminating his weathered face, a stark contrast to the darkness pressing in. His fingers, still trembling slightly, connected the GoPro, and he began to meticulously review the footage. The tiny screen flickered to life, showing the chaotic thrashing, the murky water, the unmistakable outline of his own terror, then a blur of gold. The cub, her deliberate approach, the focused intensity in her eyes as she clamped down on the branch, the sharp snap that freed him, and finally, the male lion, immense and powerful, standing down, his gaze inscrutable as the cub stood between them. Impossible. It's all there, he murmured, his voice a raw whisper of disbelief, the proof undeniable, yet utterly incomprehensible. He leaned back, the canvas chair creaking under his weight. The scientific ramifications of this footage crashed down on him. Publishing this would defy everything known about predator-prey dynamics, about animal instinct. They'll call me a fraud, he muttered, running a hand over his face. Or worse, a madman. His entire career, built on meticulous observation and scientific integrity, hung in the balance. How could he present evidence that shattered the very foundations of ethology? Upon his return, he resolved he would consult Dr. Imani Nkosi, a renowned ethologist. Imani possessed a keen mind and an open, if skeptical, intellect. Perhaps she could provide a rational explanation for what felt so profoundly irrational. She was his only hope for validation, or at least understanding. For 3 days, Ethan maintained his distance, documenting the pale pride with his backup equipment. He couldn't bring himself to leave. Every scan through his lens felt like an act of espionage. The golden cub, whom he'd taken to calling Eyebrow due to her distinctive marking, often glanced in his direction, her gaze holding an unsettling depth, a recognition that belied her species. On the 4th day, after a successful wildebeest kill, the unimaginable happened again. As the pride feasted, Eyebrow, with slow, deliberate movements, detached a piece of meat from the carcass. Not a scrap, but a choice cut. She carried it in her mouth carefully for a full 20 yards, placing it precisely on the ground. Then she looked up, directly at Ethan's distant vehicle, her amber eyes seeming to bore into him. "She's offering it to me?" Ethan whispered, the anthropomorphic thought immediately dismissed, yet clinging to the edges of his mind. The cold logic of science told him it was impossible, a coincidence, misinterpretation. But a chilling pattern of behavior was emerging, a clear intent that went far beyond mere curiosity. This wasn't instinct. As he replayed the bizarre scene in his head, other subtle oddities from his past observations began to resurface. A brief, unsettling lameness he'd once photographed in a Challenger male from another pride, months ago. Unusual, almost paranoid aggression in a different pride near a remote research outpost he'd visited. He'd dismissed them then as anomalies, natural variations. Now they felt like breadcrumbs leading down a dark path. He tried to dismiss it again, call it coincidence. But the unease was a live thing in his chest, a primal instinct. Deeper than any scientific training, flared to life. Something unnatural was unfolding. These behaviors, particularly like Eyebrow's intelligence and intentional acts, felt connected to a larger, unseen force, a disturbance in the natural order. Sleep evaded him. The image of the cub's eyes, her deliberate actions, the offering, they replayed endlessly in his mind. These weren't random acts. They felt like a response to something, a communication. Then, a sudden chilling memory. He had lost several memory cards during the incident. One particular card, he realized with a jolt, contained sensitive field notes and specific geotagged locations of past observations of unusual animal health issues he had dismissed as isolated incidents. He silently hoped it wasn't truly lost. The thought that those details might somehow connect to this new, impossible reality sent a shiver down his spine. Could the cub's gratitude be a form of communication, a warning even, about something affecting their environment? The hypothesis was wild, absurd, but it refused to leave him. His training screamed caution, demanded scientific rigor, but his gut screamed louder, urging him to investigate, to push beyond the comfortable boundaries of observational science. He started to wonder if the unusual coloration of the male lion and now the cub's unprecedented intelligence might be connected to something biological, a deeper systemic change in their environment, something engineered perhaps. The thought was terrifying. This isn't just about lions, Ethan muttered, reviewing the footage again, eyes staring out from the screen. A cold, creeping dread began to settle in his bones, heavier than any backpack. This is about something far more dangerous. On the seventh day, the pale pride, a shimmering anomaly in the vast green of the delta, moved. Ethan followed, maintaining his usual respectful distance, setting up his observation post on a low, dusty rise. The air was thick with the scent of dry grass and impending rain, but his focus was absolute. He couldn't shake the cub eyebrow from his thoughts. Through his telephoto lens, he watched as eyebrow separated from the pride. She moved with purpose, her golden coat a stark contrast against the parched earth. She began to paw at the ground, persistently, in one particular spot, occasionally pausing to glance back towards Ethan's distant vehicle. "What is she doing?" he questioned aloud, the words barely a breath. Her actions seemed deliberate, urgent, almost a clear signal. This wasn't the aimless play of a cub. This was a focused effort, a communication. Once the pride, sated by an unseen kill, moved deeper into the acacia thicket, Ethan, a mix of surging curiosity and a gnawing unease propelling him, cautiously approached the spot. The earth was disturbed, a small depression where eyebrow had been digging, and there, glinting in the late afternoon sun, lay a small rectangular object. His distinctive red-taped memory card. The very one he'd thought lost forever to the murky depths of the river, swept away with his backpack. She found it, for me," he whispered, the impossible words forming on his lips. This act defied all known science, object permanence, association, and an altruistic intent that shattered every preconceived notion of animal behavior. He felt a profound sense of disorientation, as if the very ground beneath his feet had shifted. His mind, usually so adept at categorization and explanation, simply had no framework for this. Back in the secure confines of his vehicle, Ethan's hands trembled as he inserted the memory card into his laptop. It was all there. His lost photos, a vivid record of the wilderness he loved. But hidden deeper, nestled within encrypted folders, were field notes, GPS coordinates of remote, rarely visited areas, and records of anomalous biomarker readings from previously studied animals. Data he'd dismissed as inconclusive or isolated incidents, evidence of unexplained environmental stressors. Cross-referencing the GPS data, a chilling pattern began to emerge. Several of these anomalous readings correlated with areas bordering industrial concessions and a discrete research facility he'd only ever heard whispers about, a place officially listed as an agricultural development site, yet guarded with disproportionate secrecy. "This isn't natural," Ethan whispered, his voice strained, a cold dread seeping into him. The biomarkers hinted at something synthetic, something far beyond natural toxins. He remembered the slightly aggressive, almost erratic behavior of other prides he'd observed months ago near these very locations. Could this be connected? He looked at a photo of the golden cub, eyebrow, her distinctive dark patch above her right eye. It clicked. Her unprecedented intelligence, her gratitude, her seemingly impossible acts of communication, they weren't just an anomaly. They were a response to this hidden threat, a desperate, silent attempt to communicate the danger. The pieces began to coalesce into a terrifying mosaic. The unusual coloration of the pale male lion, a deviation from the norm, the cub's enhanced cognitive abilities, the synthetic biomarkers, the geotagged hidden locations, a chilling narrative of human interference, perhaps a failed experiment, illegal waste dumping, or unethical genetic research began to unfold before his eyes. His role as a detached observer, a documentarian of the wild, was shattered. This wasn't just about documenting, this was a call to action. He had a moral obligation to expose this, to protect these animals no matter the personal or professional risk. The realization dawned with sickening clarity. The lions weren't just facing the natural dangers of the savannah. They were living victims of a silent, insidious, man-made crisis. He knew who he had to turn to. He would share the memory card's disturbing data with Dr. Nkosi, understanding that this now far transcended simple wildlife observation. This was a critical threat, an unfolding disaster that demanded expertise beyond his own. "They know. The animals know," Ethan murmured, his gaze fixed on the cub's image on the screen, a profound sense of dread replacing his initial awe. "And now I do too." Dawn broke with a brutal beauty, painting the vast canvas of the savannah in hues of gold and crimson. Ethan, camera in hand, stood ready, preparing for what he intended to be his final day of observation. He was determined to document as much as possible, a final record, before he unveiled the chilling truths buried within his memory card. The pride engaged in their typical morning activities, stretching, grooming, the cubs playing in the nascent warmth. Yet even amidst this normalcy, Eyebrow was different. She paused frequently, her golden head lifting, her intelligent eyes looking directly toward Ethan's distant vehicle, an unsettling vigilance in her posture. Suddenly, the pale male lion rose, his massive head snapping up, every muscle taut. An immediate stillness fell over the pride. Then, from the eastern horizon, 3 unfamiliar, younger, and visibly more aggressive male lions appeared. They moved with a chilling purpose directly towards the pride. "A takeover. This is bad," Ethan muttered, his blood running cold. He knew the brutal cost of such encounters. The resident male often killed, the cubs almost certainly slaughtered. His heart sank with a heavy dread, especially for Eyebrow. He instinctively reached for his camera, his prime directive, etched into years of professional training, echoing in his mind. "Observe, never interfere." The words felt hollow, a flimsy shield against the surge of compassion and fear for the creatures before him. The resident male, immense but outnumbered, braced for confrontation. The females, with the other 2 cubs, instinctively began to retreat into the dense, thorny vegetation. But Eyebrow, defying every instinct for self-preservation, broke away. She darted, a flash of gold, directly towards Ethan's vehicle. She reached his jeep, skidding to a halt, her head tilted up, and she vocalized a sound Ethan had never heard a lion make. It wasn't a growl, nor a chuff, nor a roar. It was an urgent, distinctive series of almost guttural, pleading sounds, directed unmistakably at him. "What is it?" he whispered, his hand hovering over the door handle. Against every single shred of his training, against the cardinal rule of his profession, Ethan cautiously opened the door of his elevated vehicle. Eyebrow looked up at him, her desperate intent searing into him, then turned and took several deliberate steps towards the thicket where the females had disappeared, looking back expectantly. She wasn't just observing him, she was beckoning. In the distance, the sounds of confrontation began. Deep, resonant roars, the sickening thud of bodies colliding, signaling imminent physical combat. The odds were stacked heavily against the single resident male. He heard a desperate guttural snarl, then another, louder. "She's trying to lead me somewhere," Ethan realized, the cub's intent stunningly clear, cutting through the chaos. The weight of the memory card's secret, the chilling data about human interference, pressed on him with an almost physical force. He knew the stakes. To interfere was to risk everything: his career, his reputation, his life. To disrupt the natural order, as the purists would argue, was unforgivable. But to stand by, to witness this unfolding tragedy, knowing the secret he now carried, knowing the true, unnatural threat these animals faced, felt like an unforgivable betrayal. It was a moral agony tearing at his very core. "Damn protocol," Ethan gritted out, the words raw. He grabbed his professional camera, a small emergency pack, and secured his satellite phone. His face was a mask of grim determination, fear and resolve warring in his eyes. I can't just watch this. He carefully exited the vehicle, eyes scanning the horizon for immediate threats, for the male lions locked in battle, for any unseen danger. His legs felt heavy, but his resolve was iron. He began following the cub, driven by an agonizing mix of compassion for the small creature and the chilling implications of the data on the memory card. This was no longer about science, it was about survival and a profound human-caused injustice. He heard the distant roars intensify, now punctuated by the frantic snarls of the challenger males, signaling a brutal, likely fatal fight. He was putting himself in extreme danger, stepping into a primal conflict that was not his to join, but the cub's desperate, intelligent plea outweighed all fear, all logic. "Lead the way, little one," Ethan whispered to the golden cub, his heart pounding in his chest, crossing an invisible line between observer and participant, knowing there was no turning back. If you thought the story couldn't get more shocking, prepare yourselves. Ethan has just made an impossible choice, stepping out of his vehicle and into the heart of an escalating lion war, all because of a tiny golden cub and a memory card that whispers of a terrifying conspiracy. The stakes are higher than ever, not just for Ethan, but for the very future of the Okavango. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to unravel this escalating thriller with us. Ethan cautiously followed Eyebrow, the golden cub's small form darting through the tall grass towards a dense thicket. Every sense was on high alert, the air thick with the metallic tang of fear and the acrid scent of adrenaline. The sounds of distant combat, the guttural roars and furious snarls of male lions, echoed ominously, growing fainter as they moved deeper into the wilderness. As he neared the thicket's edge, two adult females materialized from the shadows, their immense bodies tensed, eyes narrowed to predatory slits. They rose, snarling low in their throats, their focus shifting instantly from the distant fight to the human intruder. "Easy, easy," Ethan murmured, freezing mid-step, his hands raised in a gesture of submission, acutely aware of the fragility of his life. Eyebrow, seemingly oblivious to the immediate danger she'd led him into, trotted past the snarling females, going straight to the other two cubs huddled within the shadows. She nudged them, a soft reassurance, then turned, her intelligent eyes fixing on Ethan as if expecting him to simply follow. 30 agonizing seconds passed, an eternity under the female's unwavering, aggressive stares. They warned him away with low growls, their tails twitching, but they didn't attack. They're waiting? Ethan realized, his mind reeling, utterly baffled by their hesitation. Their instincts should have demanded immediate action. Responding to a fresh surge of intensified fighting echoing from the east, Eyebrow broke the standoff. She approached one of the tense females, vocalizing insistently a series of urgent, chuffing sounds, looking between the female and Ethan. She then repeated this inexplicable communication with the other adult female, her intent unmistakable. A subtle shift occurred in the lead female's posture. Her rigid stance softened, her ears swiveled, listening to the fading sounds of battle. She made a low, rumbling, gathering call, a sound that resonated deep within Ethan's chest. The other females, responding, began gently herding the two younger cubs deeper into the thicket's impenetrable embrace. Eyebrow, however, remained, watching Ethan. Then the lead female turned her side to Ethan, a position of extreme vulnerability. She looked over her shoulder directly at him, then at the retreating group, then back. Her message, delivered with an impossible clarity that defied logic, seemed to pierce his very soul. "Follow us." Ethan's scientific training screamed protest, every rule of professional conduct shattering around him, but his gut instinct, fueled by the memory card's dark revelations and Eyebrow's impossible intelligence, urged him forward. This was beyond anything documented, beyond anything he could have ever imagined. He cautiously followed them, pushing through the thorny branches, his clothes snagging, his skin pricking. He emerged into a small clearing, a hidden sanctuary within the dense vegetation. The pride was huddled there, wary, yes, but miraculously not aggressive. Two sets of amber eyes, those of the adult females, watched him, but without malice. The cubs, wide-eyed, stared. For 3 surreal hours, Ethan sat against a gnarled tree trunk, documenting this impossible coexistence. A human, a wildlife photographer, sharing sanctuary with the pride of wild lions, all while the distant roars of conflict slowly subsided into an uneasy quiet. He snapped pictures, not just for scientific proof, but to anchor himself to this unbelievable reality. Eyebrow, his golden savior, frequently approached him, sometimes sitting just feet away, watching him with that same curious, intelligent intensity that had first drawn him in. A silent, profound understanding passed between them. As afternoon waned, a new shadow fell over the clearing. The resident male appeared, emerging from the thicket, his magnificent pale coat matted with blood and dust, his body visibly battered but alive. His immediate reaction was primal. A low growl, an aggressive advance towards Ethan, his eyes burning with territorial rage. Before Ethan could even react, Eyebrow darted between them, a blur of gold. She made the same chuffing, insistent sounds, engaging in what appeared to be a direct, urgent communication with her father. The male paused, his large head tilting, listening. Slowly, impossibly, the male's aggression melted away. He settled at the clearing's edge, positioning himself not against Ethan, but between the entrance to the thicket and the huddled pride, effectively including Ethan in their protective circle. The threat is outside, Ethan understood, a profound chill settling in his bones. He was no longer just an observer, he was part of their family, part of their defense. A sudden torrential downpour erupted, trapping them within the dense thicket. Ethan prepared for the most extraordinary night of his life, sleeping feet away from wild lions, a silent understanding bridging species driven by a shared, hidden threat that bound them together. The cleansing dawn broke over the Okavango Delta, washing the night's anxieties and the rain-slicked earth clean. The male lion, stiff and scarred but miraculously alive, led his pride out of the thicket sanctuary. Ethan watched them go, a respectful distance maintained, his own body aching from the ordeal, his mind reeling from the extraordinary night. They returned to familiar territory, a quiet retreat from the violence that had threatened them. As Ethan prepared to leave, the golden cub, Eyebrow, separated from her pride. She approached his vehicle, her gaze fixed on him. Then she raised a small golden paw, holding it suspended for a silent moment, a gesture that defied instinct, that could only be interpreted as a farewell. "Goodbye, little one," Ethan whispered, a lump forming in his throat, his world irrevocably altered by her impossible actions. Days later, in the sterile environment of Dr. Imani Nkosi's lab in Cape Town, Ethan sat across a polished table, looking clean but haunted. He plugged in his GoPro, the tiny camera now holding more than just footage. It held a truth that would shatter scientific paradigms. Dr. Nkosi, a woman of sharp intellect and analytical composure, initially watched with a skeptical frown. But as the footage played, the cub's deliberate rescue, the impossible offering, the retrieval of the memory card, and the unprecedented acceptance of a human within their sanctuary, her skepticism slowly crumbled. Her eyes widened, her jaw slackened. "Ethan, this is impossible," she murmured, her voice barely a whisper. "Yet, it's undeniable." Then Ethan presented the deeper secret from the recovered memory card. Encrypted data, geotagged locations of unusual animal health readings, and highly specific synthetic biomarker detections near a remote, corporate-owned concession hidden deep within the Delta. Dr. Nkosi's team immediately correlated the biomarker data with a major pharmaceutical corporation, Biogenesis Solutions. They were known for cutting-edge, often controversial genetic research, operating a wildlife research facility in a highly protected, rarely accessed corner of the Delta. The puzzle pieces began to slot into place, forming a terrifying picture. Working through the night, they unearthed internal documents, anonymously leaked years ago, but dismissed as outlandish conspiracy theories. These documents hinted at radical experiments to enhance specific animal traits for conservation purposes, but with alarming side effects, increased aggression, unusual physical traits, and severe cognitive anomalies. The pale coat of the male, the cub's unprecedented intelligence. "It's all connected," Dr. Nkosi stated, aghast, her voice laced with chilling certainty. "Eyebrow wasn't just grateful, Imani," Ethan said, his voice thick with emotion, the raw truth of it burning in his chest. "She was trying to communicate. She was leading me to the truth. to the evidence of what they're doing to her kind. She's a victim and a witness. Further evidence quickly mounted: suspicious land acquisitions by biogenesis, local reports of strange animal deaths aggressively silenced, rapid and categorical denials from the corporation concerning environmental impact or research in the area. It was a classic corporate cover-up, meticulously constructed to hide a monstrous secret. The Challenger male lions, exhibiting heightened unnatural aggression, may also have been affected by the manipulations. The entire delicate ecosystem of the Okavango Delta was under threat from unethical genetic experimentation. Ethan realized his role had fundamentally shifted. He was no longer just a photographer, an observer of the wild. He was a witness, a protector, an unlikely advocate for the golden cub in her poisoned world. "We have to expose this," he told Dr. Nkosi, his eyes burning with a renewed, unshakable purpose. "This is dangerous, Ethan. Biogenesis has immense power and reach," Dr. Nkosi warned, her voice grim, but her resolve matched his. "But we have the evidence, and we have a witness, a golden oracle." 3 years later, Ethan, funded by independent conservation groups and working alongside Dr. Nkosi, led a multidisciplinary team back to the Okavango. Eyebrow, now a magnificent young adult, still tolerated human observers, still watched with those impossibly intelligent eyes, a living testament to the impossible, a silent guardian of the truth. The world needs to know. Ethan looked at Eyebrow through his lens, a solemn promise passing between them. The conspiracy was vast, the fight just beginning. His life trajectory was irrevocably changed, forever bound to the golden lioness who had showed him a world of cognition and danger he never knew existed. Ethan Cale, a name synonymous with wildlife photography, had built his decade-long career on an unwavering principle: observe, never interfere. His reputation, forged through intimate, unadulterated captures of Africa's majestic lions for National Geographic and BBC Wildlife, now felt like a relic from a different life. He never intended to be in the water that day, dragged beneath the murky surface of the Okavango Delta, certainly not to be saved by a lion cub. Lions weren't known for their fondness of humans splashing around, let alone for acts of astonishing altruism and intelligence. But Eyebrow, the golden cub, had defied every scientific law, pulling him from the brink of death, leading him to a lost memory card, and finally sheltering him within her pride. This wasn't merely gratitude. It was a desperate, intelligent plea, a primal alarm against the chilling human interference of biogenesis solutions, the synthetic biomarkers, the enhanced aggression, the unusual traits. It was all part of a vast, unethical experiment threatening the Delta's very soul. Ethan's prime directive, once sacred, was irrevocably shattered. He was no longer just a photographer. He was a reluctant warrior, a witness to a truth the world desperately needed to know, guided by a golden oracle who showed him a future far more perilous and profoundly interconnected than he could have ever imagined. The fight had just begun.